Hello. Today it is November the 8th. As you get older, every day in your memory, you think, oh, isn't that someone's birthday? Or isn't that a special day? Wasn't that an anniversary? Because you have more years behind you and lots of things happen each year, it seems almost like every day is auspicious for some reason. The 8th, so maybe I'm thinking the 8th of October, for example, is my sister's birthday. And I know the 11th of November is Armistice Day, or in Korea, Pepero Day. The 5th of November, which we just passed, is Guy Fawkes Night, or Guy Fawkes Day. In some countries celebrate that, most Commonwealth countries. So there's days around or similar, but then you think, well, what is the 8th of November? Is there something special I'm forgetting? Anyway, it's getting quite hot here in this, spring, mid-spring is November, I guess. But yesterday, I had a look in a few shops, not many actually, 3 shops. First one, nothing. I'll say all of the shops had a lot of CDs, had a lot of stock, as in like shelves. Like when you go to a second-hand shop here in New Zealand. So yesterday I went to a hospice shop, a St. Vincent de Paul shop, and an SPCA second-hand shop. All of those second-hand shops selling mostly second-hand clothes. That's always primarily the main thing. Second-hand houseware, like plates and bowls and cups and shit like that. What else? Just bit knickknacks, like sometimes like paintings or like little decorations, ornaments, things like that. DVDs, a lot of DVDs, and then CDs and records as well. And usually the CDs are in usually one kind of shelf, say like a fridge. I don't know how big fridges are in your country, but just a regular size fridge. So I got one next to me, but I don't want to show you my fridge because it's got lots of crap magnetized to the front of it, and I'm sure there's something personal on there that I probably shouldn't show people. But anyway, it's, the typical fridge is about, 5 foot tall, I guess, and about 3 foot wide, maybe. So I would say that would be the average size. And it's, kind of got maybe 5 or 6 shelves divided up, and some are smaller, some are bigger, and just full of CDs. So it's not a shortage of stock, but by and large, as I say every time, the vast majority, in some cases all, are not things I'm looking for at all. Sometimes just utter crap. So many classical music compilations. So many things like Barbra Streisand, a lot of Barbra Streisand, Susan Boyle, James Last, don't even know who that is, but he seems to be in every goddamn second-hand shop in the country. The Seekers, I guess like decade compilations, hits from the 60s, hits from the 70s. But classical compilations, I'd say 75% of all music compact disc stocks in second-hand shops in this country is made up of classical music compilation. What I mean by classical music compilations, I mean they'll pick an artist like Wagner or Strauss or Mozart, and it will just be a disc of some of their music. It won't be any particular, or sometimes it is, sometimes like the Sixth Symphony or the Overture in C sharp, whatever it might be. Or things like the best classical music ever compilation, or classical music to help you study, or classical music for your baby, or classical music for pregnancy, or classical music to eat a banana, or whatever else. So it seems to be classical music for everything. And so, not much else. Now, what I used to do, because I've been through stages here, where I've talked about this before. I said, kind of the first year when I started recollecting in 2020, when kind of COVID was in full, well, actually in New Zealand it wasn't, but the rest of the world it was in full swing. That was kind of like prime years for CD buying. Go to any shop and you'd just be picking up stacks, 10, 20 CDs a day, all really good stuff. But they're kind of, a lot of stuff I needed, I got. And then also, like I said, it seemed like people started cottoning on, and so there's less stuff available. And so then what I did more over the last, not so much this year, but maybe 22, 23, I kind of started taking punts and just looking at discs that I thought might be interesting, and sometimes, more often than not, striking out, finding that I didn't like it at all. It was not what I thought it would be, or just it was boring or something like that. But it's kind of something I was doing there for a while. But the problem with doing that is that then you kind of get a lot of crap, and that takes up a lot of space, and you don't know what to do with it. You just give it back to donate it back to the op shop, or try to sell it or whatever. And I've shown some of those boxes full of that I've got of things that I don't necessarily want. Well, here's something that I bought yesterday. Now this says 5/24. I assume obviously 2024 is 2024. 5, is that from May, perhaps? Because usually that's how they do it. They usually have the date it was put on the shelf. Now, I've never heard of this lady before, Keiko Matsui. Why did I pick up this? Well, I actually have a little sub-collection of Japanese music. Why? Well, I lived in Japan for a few years, and I'm interested in Japan, and there's some Japanese music I like. There's also a lot of absolutely terrible Japanese music, but there's a certain sensibility I find in Japanese music that meshes well with things that I like. And I can't really describe it much more beyond this. Now, I quickly did a Google search on this before I bought it. This was only $1, so it's hardly like it's a massive gamble. The price of things nowadays, like a cup of coffee in New Zealand is like $5 or $6. Not that I drink coffee. I was thinking this morning, I've drunk coffee twice in my life. This isn't like, I'm not like a teetotaler against caffeine or something. It was just, I don't like the taste. So the first time, speaking of Japan, it was when I was living in Japan. I had some trouble. The company I was working for stopped paying the rent of the apartment. So they were meant to be paying the rent directly to the landlord of the place where I lived. And they stopped doing that because they were having money troubles, unbeknownst to me. And so I got a note taped to my door in broken English, because they knew I was a foreigner. And they said, basically, you haven't been paying rent. Contact us or we're going to throw your stuff out onto the street. They weren't actually, the tenancy laws in Japan are very strong in favor of renters, and they actually can't do that. They were actually kind of lying. It's very hard to evict someone from an apartment or from a rented property in Japan. You have to go through a big process. You can't just, say if they don't pay rent for a month, you can't just go in there as a landlord and use your key to get in and then just chuck all their stuff out and change the locks. That's illegal to do. It's illegal to do in many countries. But even if they don't pay rent, like it can go like years without paying rent, and there's a lot of protections in place. So anyway, without making the story too long, I went along to the property management office, which was near the apartment, and they were actually very, very nice. No, actually, did they come? I think, no, first of all, this is a long time ago. This is almost 20 years ago now, or 18 years ago. No, 17 years ago. They came over and visited. We made an appointment, and 2 people came over. My Japanese wasn't great, and their English wasn't great as well. I actually was, my Japanese was okay when I was living in Japan. I managed to pick up a decent amount. I studied quite a lot. But when you're actually using it in real life situations, like a tenancy issue, you quickly realize that your vocabulary is fairly limited. And so I remember we were sitting there one night, the 2 people, and they came, and we made an agreement. Anyway, basically, like I said, they couldn't boot me out, but I was leaving Japan anyway in February. So it was like a month and a half until I was leaving. And I said, look, I'm going to be leaving anyway. Because the company was taking the rent money from my salary and not paying it. So it wasn't really I don't know the legal grounds which would have been here or there, but as far as I was concerned, I was paying the rent, but they weren't passing it on. But anyway, they seemed really happy that I was agreeing to leave. So they were like, okay, in 6 weeks you'll be out of here. And I said, yeah. And they said, okay, perfect, great. They were perhaps worried that this was going to drag on for years with some random foreigner refusing to leave their apartment. So they were satisfied with that. And then I think we had to come again and sign a document basically promising I would leave. So I had to go one morning, and I remember it was snowing this morning that I was doing. This was in Tokyo, it was snowing. And went into there, and when I sat down to sign it in their office, they gave me a cup of coffee to drink. So a warm, a hot cup of coffee because it was really cold outside. And I didn't want to say, hey, I don't drink coffee. So I kind of forced it down, and it was like drinking, like imagine if someone was smoking a cigarette and what do you call, like doing the ash into a cup and then running some hot water and stirring the ash with some hot water. That's what it tasted like. And I was like, why do people drink this? But I drank it because I wanted to seem polite. You know what the Japanese are like. There are all sorts of unwritten rules that you can run afoul of quite easily by not accepting certain things or not doing the things the way you're supposed to. And most parts, foreigners are kind of exempt from those kind of social etiquettes. But I thought, well, I'm trying to make a good impression. They're going to let me stay here for 6 weeks, basically rent-free. And so I drank the cup of coffee. And the second time I drank a cup of coffee was when I was just recently, my son was doing a arts and crafts event, and I was having to wait for him nearby. And so the only place I could wait was this cafe. And I wanted to sit on their seats because I don't want to be standing around. So I bought a cup of coffee. It was the cheapest thing on the menu. And I sat there and I think, well, I'll try and drink it. And again, I drank one mouthful. I was like, this is terrible. And I was like trying to thinking, well, maybe it's an acquired taste. And I kept trying to kind of drinking little bits. And I was like, honestly going to make me throw up. So that's me and coffee. How did I get onto coffee? I can't remember now. Oh, that's right. The price of coffee. $1. Anyway, I looked this lady up, Keiko Matsui, and it said that she did new age smooth jazz. And I thought, well, that's an interesting combination, isn't it? And I thought, well, I'm going to give it a try for $1. And I did. We can look at this. This was released in 1995. And from looking at it, the condition of it, I would say this was absolutely purchased around that time. Now, interestingly, as she is a Japanese artist, I don't know if she lives in Japan or anything like that, but we see this is English language, all the song names. It's put out by White Cat Unity Label Group, Pony Canton. Never heard of any of these things. I can't. Marketed and distributed, so there's no major label involved, and that's in California. So maybe she's Japanese American. Produced by Derek Nakamoto, which is a very Japanese American name, isn't it? I would like to dedicate this album to Maya and friends. Don't know who Maya is. Wow. This is very interesting. For me. All music composed by Keiko Matsui, arranged by Derek Nakamoto, except for Rob Mullins. And so we got this Rob Mullins, Carla Bonoff, Valerie Carter. So lots of non-Japanese names here. Paul Taylor, Lenny Castro, I've heard of him. Michael Fisher. Now this name here, Akira Jimbo. I've heard his name before, and I'll tell you where I heard his name. The band Opeth, originally a progressive death metal band, nowadays more just a kind of prog rock band. Although their most recent album, or the album that's about to come out in a few weeks, is kind of returning a little bit to the death metal area. their former drummer, Martin Lopez, he was the drummer from about 1997 to 2006. Some would say their best period, Still Life, Blackwater Park, Damnation, Deliverance, Ghost Reveries. They released a live DVD of a live concert performance called Lamentations, which would have been about 2003, and there was an interview section on it, like a bonus thing, about the making of Damnation and Deliverance. And they were interviewing Martin Lopez, and he was talking about some of his influences. And I remember, this name's always stuck in my brain, Akira Jimbo. He was one of the named influences of his. Now, Martin Lopez obviously is a death metal. He was not the original. He was before Opeth. He was an Amon Amarth. They were kind of Viking metal band from Sweden, or are they Norwegian or Swedish? I think they're Norwegian actually. No, they're Swedish. So he's a metal drummer, but Akira Jimbo I think was more of like a jazz drummer from memory, but he's mentioned here. But we see no other Japanese names, so I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that she is a Japanese American. But I could be wrong. This could just be an international release, so I might be completely wrong on that. So we've got some lyrics there. Although, who's Kazu? Okay, I see. I don't know, Kazu Matsui. Who's that? Is that her husband, maybe, or her brother? Because they both, Kirijimbo and Kazu Matsui appear. Matsui is a very common Japanese name. The famous baseball player, what's his name? Hideki Matsui, who played a few seasons for the Yankees. He was a Japanese player, obviously, and he, the odd Japanese player kind of comes over to the American baseball, what is it, MLB, and some are very successful, like that guy at the moment, Otani, I think is his name, seems to be really successful, and Ichiro Suzuki, and some are less successful, but I think Matsui was reasonably successful. I think they called him Godzilla was his nickname. I think he won a World Series with the Yankees. I'm not saying he was responsible for the win, but he was in the team when they won. That which would have been at 2009-ish from memory. And then over here, look at this. This is to find out about future reviews. Again, it's kind of like a thing from a bygone era. Name, address, city, state, zip. No email address because it barely existed in 1995. Your age, your sex. Couldn't ask that question nowadays. What were the last 3 records you bought? Well, favorite record store, favorite radio station, favorite club, favorite magazine. There's so strange. There's like they're all kind of those 4 last questions are kind of so meaningless nowadays. Record store. Well, what? Find me a bloody record store that's still open. There's barely any that are left. Radio station, largely meaningless. Radio used to be so important for radio, for record sales and music. And nowadays that's almost kind of like an afterthought. Favorite club? Well, I don't know what it's like in your city, but the nightlife kind of club scene in my city has really died a death. And again, used to be a lot more important, certain clubs for like being seen and, not that I was ever really into that much. And again, magazines, so many magazines have folded or just are a shadow of what they once were. How did you hear about it? And there's an international fan club, which is based in Anaheim. And then over here, her thank yous. I see some other Japanese names. Yuko, can't read that. Numano, Sake, Kobayashi, and my mother. Anyway, so last night I put this on. So on Thursday night, it's usually just me and my son, as it was last night. And so in the hour before he goes to bed, I try to kind of make a calming atmosphere in the house. And so I usually put on some music and we read, or I read to him, or he reads a book, or we just play around, or kind of winding down, getting ready for him to go to bed. And last night I put this on and I thought it was quite good. It sounds pretty much as you would imagine, 90s era smooth jazz without being too cheesy. Didn't really hear the new age influence, as I'd mentioned. I didn't really hear that much, but yeah, I thought it was good. Wasn't like anything amazing. I only listened to it once, and I wasn't really listening intently. But yeah, now I'm going to look at this. I'm going to show you, because I've just looked her up on Wikipedia. Born as a Japanese keyboardist and composer specializing in smooth jazz and new age music. Okay, so she was born in Japan, so maybe she is. This was just the international release, and so that's why it's all in English. Born in Tokyo, Japan Women's University, the Yamaha Music Foundation. And there we have this one. Sapphire reached #1 on the Billboard magazine contemporary jazz chart. So back in '95, I imagine that probably was pretty important. Matsui blends Western and Eastern music. She has a very spiritual view of composing music. A lover of nature, Matsui often makes reference to plants, animals, the elements, and other. So yes, I actually noticed that. A lot of the songs on this are kind of natural type vocabulary, like we see. Safari, Bouncing Bougainvillea, the flower. Sonora, which is a desert, isn't it? Garden, Tears from the Sun, Dragon Wings. So yeah, I'd say overall, this is an amazing, life-changing thing. But when you get something, you think, yeah, I'm glad this is something that I would like to have in my collection. Very unusual, never heard of it before, never seen it before. It's kind of old, kind of from that 90s wheelhouse that I especially like. And again, like I said, I kind of have a small, very small Japanese sub-collection. I might actually show that soon. Probably got about 15 CDs, 15 albums. Half of them I would say I bought like this. I saw the Japanese name and I took a gamble. Some of them not so good, some of them actually very good. And the other half are more things that I actually myself, like Japanese artists I liked before, and so I purposely purchased them. Yeah. So I can't remember if I said it's the reason why. A lot of people have that kind of, for whatever reason, Japanese culture seems to appeal to a lot of Westerners, and a lot of that is kind of what we call Orientalism, isn't it? That kind of theory or sociological concept that Westerners kind of exoticize, almost fetishize Eastern cultures. Like if we kind of attach this thing like the mystical, unknowable East, and whereas those things often are not true. I don't think I necessarily do that, but it's kind of hard maybe to avoid that just on account of growing up in the West. But at the same time, having lived in Asia for quite a long time and traveled there a lot, I'd say it works the other way as well. And that people from Asian countries, East Asian countries, Southeast Asian countries, often have quite wacky ideas and also kind of exoticize Western countries. And that can be in a positive and a negative way. So I think that's just kind of a natural thing that happens when cultures meet and you maybe don't fully understand them, but you like aspects of them. and you maybe attach an incorrect analysis to something you see. But yeah, myself, there's something about if you go to Japan, coming back to what I was just saying, there's something about Japan that, for me, it's like people think Japan is really futuristic, and in some ways it is, but in other ways it really isn't. It's like it's a time warp in about 1995. And that kind of matches with what happened with their economy, where they went through that massive boom post-war, where the economy just went, gangbusters, and they rebuilt, and with the, the Cold War and the Vietnam War and the Korean War, that helped them kind of boost their economy as well and their industries, and they built these companies like Toyota and Mazda, all the car companies and the electronic companies. And through the 70s and into the 80s, where the economy would just seem like it couldn't be stopped. It was just like on a rocket for the moon. And then it kind of did stop, where the bubble burst around like 89. And in some ways, it hasn't ever really recovered. The economy has kind of stayed stagnant, and kind of bobbing in and out of recession since then. And so when you go there, there's a lot of kind of 80s and 90s aesthetic, where things were obviously built around that period where there was just so much money around, like a whirlwind of money, and so much infrastructure and public spaces and not just public but private things as well were built because there was so much money, and then the money dried up, and so it hasn't really moved past that in some ways. And this is only in some aspects. In other aspects, it's as modern as anywhere else. But if you go to China or Korea, it's different. There is more of a kind of futuristic feel in those places, where it has kind of progressed through the 2000s up until today, because their economies matured later, or are still maturing. And so they haven't had this kind of time warp stasis like Japan had. And so because of that 90s pause button, that kind of creates this kind of atmosphere that really I enjoyed a lot. Just in the cities, the urban environment. I'm not even like saying any particular thing, just like the buildings and the architecture and the spaces, and probably matched together with some aspects of Japanese culture that are more unique. It really is quite, I don't know, it just fit me like a glove. In many ways, living there was kind of like, it's hard to kind of really put into words. It was kind of like the best years of my life. At the same time, I knew I couldn't stay there. It felt like a honey trap, or like the Odyssey, where the sirens sing Ulysses to the island. Might be mixing up some of the names there, and he gets stuck on the island because he's like so enraptured, or kind of under the spell of the sirens, which sounds ridiculous, like I'm carrying, but it kind of did feel you would feel like you could go there, you could get a job, because there are jobs you can do there as a foreigner, and the job, but there's not a lot of upward progression. You kind of get stuck at a certain level, and maybe get married, have a family, but you would be kind of very restricted in your life trajectory from there, if that makes sense. And it feels like in life you need to push yourself into uncomfortable things sometimes, or things that maybe you don't necessarily want to do but will benefit you in the long run. I've thought about this so many times over the years, but like, would I have been happier just to stay there? Like I could film, talk about this for hours. I know people, guys who I worked with when I was there. I know a New Zealander who I worked with when I was there. He was a little bit younger than me, and he's still there from when I was there. So it's almost coming up, he'll be 19 years next year for him, almost 20 years. And he seems absolutely content, but he also seems weird. Like his life is just paused. But then what? Then the question is like, well, what is the purpose of life? Is it just to be content? Is it to push yourself and to kind of find out something, or like, I don't know. Anyway, so the way that I try to kind of at least carry a small part of that memory that I have of living in Japan is by Japanese music. And I've returned there traveling quite a few times as well. Yeah, it's kind of a question that I go over in my brain a lot, and I think about a lot. You know, it's when you're in your life where there's so many like little intersections. And sometimes they're obvious intersections, and you think, well, this is a life-changing choice here. If I do this, I'm going to go this way. If I do that, I'm going to go that way. It will take me completely away from what I could be doing, etc. But other times, the decisions, sometimes they're out of your hands, like a health problem or a family issue or economic thing. Where if I come into work tomorrow and they said you're redundant, you're out of a job, that, especially with the economy as it is right now in New Zealand, that would have a massive impact on my life and would probably push my life in a completely different direction that I can't even imagine. And you think, well, if I went back in time and did this or did that, and think, how different would my life be now? And there's that Star Trek episode, I think it's called Tapestry, where Jean-Luc Picard can go back in time and not get into a fight because he got stabbed in the fight. And I can't remember how that was the implication of that, but his whole personality was different because he wasn't kind of adventurous in his new personality, and so he never became a captain and all blah blah blah. And so his, at the end of Star Trek, there's always this kind of moral teaching, even if it's not directly in your face. And the way he said it is that if you go back into your life and you try to pull out one thread, your life is a tapestry, and you try to pull out just one thread, I'll just change that thing. But what happens is that will pull on the other threads, and that will kind of pull the whole thing to pieces. And that's how life is. You can't pull out one thing. Yeah. Anyway, that's all very self-indulgent blabbing, isn't it? All just talking about a $1 CD that I bought on the chance that it might be okay. Anyway, we'll leave it there. If anyone has watched to the end, please let me know. And that's not just some like a marketing device. I'm actually genuinely curious as to anyone actually watches to the ends of me just rambling about utter garbage in my life. If you do, I thank you sincerely and deeply. Have a good day.